Hey brothers and sisters, welcome back. And today we're going to be talking about what the Social Work Code of Ethics has in common with the Bible. So before we get started, I did just want to introduce the Code of Ethics a little bit. This is, for lack of better words, the Social Worker Bible. This is a guide to our everyday professional conduct. And though this is rather small, a lot could be said. But for the sake of time today, I'm just going to be going over the 6 core principles, you can say, which is service, service, social justice, dignity and worth of a person, importance of human relationships, integrity, and competence. So, full disclosure, I had recorded this video about 3 times, and this is going on the 4th. I quickly learned that I go on tangents, and I'm not trying to do that. So, in order to not waste a lot of time just talking, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the specific principle that we're going to be talking about. I'm going to read the little synopsis from the booklet, and then I'm going to read through a couple of Bible verses that I feel back it up the best. I will say that I did my absolute best to ensure that all of these Bible verses are used within context. However, I am a human being. I'm not perfect. So if you feel like I got something wrong, please let me know in the comments, because I'm really not here trying to lead anybody astray. So with that being said, let's get into it. So the first one that I have here is service. Let me read you the little synopsis from this. It says, social workers elevate service to others above self-interest. Social workers draw on their knowledge, values, and skills to help people in need and to address social problems. Social workers are encouraged to volunteer some portion of their professional skills with no expectation of significant financial return, aka pro bono service. So basically, we're here to help people in need and address social problems, is what that can be summed up into. And if you're a seasoned Christian, you already know that service is kind of part of our everyday life that God wants to see from us. So there's 4 Bible verses that I found that I feel like support this the best. However, if you feel like you know of a Bible verse that would support this better, again, drop it in the comments. So I'm going to read through these real quick. First is Galatians 5:13. You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love. The next one I have here is one of my all-time favorite Bible verses. This is Matthew 25:40. This is where Jesus is talking about acts of compassion and serving the marginalized populations. And so, if it came from Jesus's mouth, it's very important. I mean, the whole Bible is from God, but, it says, the king will reply, truly, I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. Now, to new Christians, you might hear the least of these and think like, wow, that's kind of rude. And I just wanted to touch on that really quick. He's not saying that in a way that's talking down. Much like my channel name is Socially Rejectable, that is not me referring to certain populations as socially rejectable, right? This is how society can treat us. And so what Jesus is talking about here is the way society views some of these people is the least of these. And so what he's basically saying is, if you see somebody hungry and you don't give them food, if you see somebody in need of water and you don't give them water, that's essentially the same as not giving it to Jesus if that were him asking you for food or water. If that makes sense. So I won't go too long on a tangent, but moving on. Next, we have Philippians 2:4. Let each of you look not only to his own interest, but also the interest of others, which goes perfectly with service, right? That's looking out for others' interests. And then 1 Peter 4:10. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. And in this one, this is Peter reminding the church that spiritual gifts are meant for service and not for self-promotion, right? So when God gives you a gift, use it to help others. One of the best parables. I don't know if it's parable is the word, but it's that a tree doesn't eat its own fruit, right? The fruit is for others who are coming, whether it be an animal, an insect, a human. They don't eat their own fruit. And that's like service, right? When you get a gift, you use it to help others. That's like the equivalent of your fruit. And we can get into a whole spiel on that one, which gives me an idea. That's another video I can be making, is talking about the fruits of the Spirit. But I think that these Bible verses really back up that service component of the Code of Ethics over here. So moving on, the next one we have here is social justice. So the first verse I have for that is Proverbs. I forgot to read the little spiel. Here I am trying to hurry up along. Okay, so social justice. It says, social workers pursue social change, particularly with and on behalf of vulnerable and oppressed individuals and groups of people. Social workers' social change efforts are focused primarily on issues of poverty, unemployment, discrimination, and other forms of social justice. These activities seek to promote sensitivity and to acknowledge about oppression and culture and ethnic diversity. Social workers strive to ensure access to needed information, services, and resources, equality of opportunity, and meaningful participation in decision making for all people. So that's the little spiel that it has in here on social justice. And over here, I want to go ahead and read the Bible verses that I've pulled. So the first one I have is Proverbs 31, 8 through 9. This is, I believe, a mother speaking to her son who is a king and asking him to use his power to do social justice, essentially. It says, "Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. For the rights of all who are destitute, speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy." Sounds like social justice to me. The next one I have here is Isaiah 1:17. "Learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed, take up the cause of the fatherless," also orphans, for lack of better words, "and plead the case of the widow." And then the next one I have is Micah 6:8. "He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." And so that's, here it is love mercy, walk humbly with your God, act justly. And I think that word love there is something that I do see a lot in social work. A lot of times we come in as people who haven't had the easiest lives ourselves, and we recognize the problems, and we don't want other people to feel that same way or have the same struggles that we do. And that right there in itself is a huge act of love. And mercy, that's something God talks about a lot. Can also be similar to forgiveness in a lot of ways. And I think in today's society, we see some of these populations and instantly feel the need to start judging, instead of taking a step back and thinking, like, how did this person even get here? What can I do to help? And that's that love and mercy component that really comes into social work a lot of times, is when we're able to put the negatives to the side and just focus on what we can do to help the person in that moment, instead of trying to find all the reasons why this person is messed up, for lack of better words. So moving on to the next one, this is dignity and worth of a person. I probably should have thought this out better instead of constantly flipping back and forth. But like I told you guys in my first video, I am still starting, so it's going to be a little bit sloppy until I get my life figured out. So just bear with me. So, okay, dignity and worth of a person. Social workers treat each person in a caring and respectful fashion, mindful of individual differences in culture and ethnic diversity. Social workers promote clients' socially responsible self-determination. Social workers seek to enhance clients' capacity and opportunity to change and to address their own needs. Social workers are cognizant of their dual responsibility to clients and the broader society. They seek to resolve conflicts between clients' interests and the broader society's interests in a socially responsible manner consistent with the values, ethical principles, and ethical standards of the profession. So, moving on here, got some Bible verses that back up dignity and worth of a person. So the first one, Genesis 1:27. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. I know a lot of seasoned Christians know what this means. If you're a newer Christian, what this is essentially talking about by saying we were created in his image, it's a likeness, right? So God might not look like me. I know he doesn't. He doesn't look like you. He doesn't look like my husband, but it's a likeness. And so I think one of the things that has helped me the most when it comes to dealing with people, especially difficult people, because I haven't always had this big heart. I used to actually struggle with a lot of anger, and I was a very hateful person for a long time before I found Christ. But when I read that we're all fearfully and wonderfully made in God's image and his likeness, it kind of reminds me that I need to take a step back, and even the most difficult person that I might have to deal with is still made in God's image. And so, yes, I know that that person is not God. However, I want to treat that person as though they were made in his image, if that makes sense, right? So moving on a little bit, I just wanted to touch on that for a second. The next one I have here is Psalm 139:14. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. And this context is basically just David like marveling at God's awesomeness and how he created each and every single one of us. Next one I have here, sorry, I know I'm being choppy. Like I said, I'm just trying not to make this a 45-minute video like the last two times. So Matthew 10:31. So don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. It sounds a little strange. I didn't want to put the whole multiple verses in here, but the context of this is Jesus assuring his followers that their value to God, even amid persecution, is still greater than a sparrow. And I believe the verse before it is talking about how even when a sparrow falls or passes away, God is aware of it. And I know I've heard a lot about how God loves birds. So if he's fully aware of that when an animal passes, then surely he's aware of what we're going through and our struggles and what we're having to deal with. So he's basically just saying, like, are you not greater than sparrows? And we're made in his likeness, so yes. And so the next one here, Romans 12:10. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. And this is where Paul is talking to believers to practice mutual respect and selflessness within like the body of Christ. And I actually know that I believe it was in Galatians. We did a Bible study last night, and there was a verse that I should have added in here, and it was something along the lines of like the loving each other as you love yourselves. This is the fulfillment of the law, and I thought that would have just been perfect. I need to go back and find it, but if you know, you know. Drop it in the comments if you already know which verse I'm talking about. I might just put it up here once I go back and find it. But I think these are all really great verses to really tie in that dignity and worth of a person and treating each other with mutual love, mutual respect, and even loving one another above ourselves. And just to go on a quick side tangent with that, I won't be too long. I know I would read that verse time and time again and think, how am I supposed to love people when I hate myself? What do you mean love other people as I love myself? I hate myself. So it only makes sense that I hate other people. And like in that moment, it was like, that's why you have to show some kind of self-love. Now, I will say that in modern day society, a lot of this self-love stuff can sometimes teeter. I'm not saying like narcissistic personality disorder per se, but there's a lot of narcissistic tendencies that can go into what this idea of modern day self-love is. And it's not just doing makeup, getting your hair done, and acting a fool on the weekends because you can. Self-love is setting boundaries. It's taking breaks. It's caring for yourself. It's when you are dealing with depression or something, have a nap, have a snack. You don't have to overwork yourself 24/7. Like, take a break. That way you can pour into other people. You know, you always hear that you can't pour from an empty glass, and that's why self-love is important. I would almost say it's more like self-respect or self-care. If you're empty, you're not going to have much to give. So it's important that we love and care for ourselves so that way we do have something to give when the time comes and God does need us. So done with that spiel, moving on. Next one we have here is importance of human relationships. So let me go all the way back to the page. Okay. So this one, it says, social workers understand that relationships between and among people are an important vehicle for change. Social workers engage people as partners in the helping process. Social workers seek to strengthen relationships among people in a purposeful effort to promote, restore, maintain, and enhance the well-being of individuals, families, social groups, organizations, and communities. I feel like I didn't breathe when I read that. So, with that being said, the important or the verses I have to kind of back that up here are Ecclesiastes 4, 9 through 10. It says, two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. And I believe this context was Psalm reflecting on like companionship. And I agree. There's so many studies out there that show that actually isolation and lack of social support can severely negatively affect your mental health. And I believe there's even, if I don't have it listed here, which I don't think I did, there's a few verses I found about fellowship. And it is important. It, as much as, you know, even as an introvert myself, I love to like seclude myself, but it's not always healthy. So we do need to come together, but not just within the congregation, but the world outside of the church walls also needs us. So if you can, try to get out there, do some volunteer work. There's always places looking for volunteers. Usually you can make your own hours so it can work with your schedule, but God needs vessels like us to get out there and reach these people who don't have somebody to talk to or listen to. And sometimes that's all they want. I know my husband and I have helped in multiple different ministries that help the people who are dealing with homelessness. And I cannot begin to tell you the amount of times I can see just a weight get lifted just because you sit there and listen to them, not judging, not correcting, not getting onto them when they tell you about a sin or something that they've done, just being understanding in the moment. And it does matter. So if you're watching this, all I ask of you is to please get out there and try to reach those that a lot of people in society tend to overlook. So moving on. Galatians 6:2, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. Like I said, we just read through Galatians in our last Bible study, and I was like, man, this whole book is great. There were so many I wanted to add, but then I'd be talking for hours here. So the next one I have here is Hebrews 10:24 through 25. And let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, but encouraging one another. And so again, I believe this is more urging believers to stay connected in their own communities, which is great. You know, like I said, not just within the church walls, but going outside. And there's a lot of Christians who are even called to leave their communities and go other countries, across seas, you name it. So, and there's even places in social work. I know there is international social work. I'm not super familiar with it. It's not something I was ever called to, but maybe you're watching this channel because you're thinking about getting into social work. And I just want to say it is a huge umbrella. There is so much you can do with it. I know I'm going on another side tangent, but I'll be quick, I promise. I just wanted to add in that in social work, there are like 3 different paths you can take. One is macro, and that's going to be more politics, policy type stuff, lobbying. And those social workers do get a lot done. That's not the area I'm called to, though. So more power to you if you're in that field. There's also a meso, which is more community-based, right? Like think groups, nonprofits, things like that. And then there's a micro, which is like one-on-one therapy, which a lot of us are more used to. That's, from my experience, at least in grad school, that's where a lot of people tended to want to go, is to the micro, like one-on-one therapy session type stuff. And no matter which one you choose, there is no wrong answer. Like, don't let somebody tell you that just because you're not getting involved in politics that you're not social worker enough. That's toxic talk right there. Every single one of us makes a difference, whether it's one-on-one or on a global or even international scale. Like, no matter what, every single one of us is needed. So if you're trying to choose a path, choose the one that feels right to you. So moving on, the last one I have here is John 15:12. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. And this is Jesus speaking to his disciples before his crucifixion. And I saw something on Facebook the other day that said the real test of loving like Jesus is not loving Jesus, but loving Judas. I'm not saying that us social workers are loving Judas all the time. We get a lot of great clients, a lot of great people that we see, but sometimes there is that one difficult person and you're just like, I don't know what to do. That's a test, right? And it doesn't mean that you sit there and tolerate, abusive talks or behaviors. You are still allowed to set boundaries as a social worker. And if you have a client who is making you feel unsafe, it's actually ethical to have them transferred, because the second you become uncomfortable with them, it can affect the quality of care that you're providing. So just know that if you get into this field and you're thinking like, what if I get stuck with some horrible you're allowed to protect yourself and request that that client be moved to somebody who maybe specializes more in whatever it is that they're going through, because the last thing you want to do is burn yourself out, right? But still, what that means is, I love this person, I care, I want to see what's best for them, and because I feel like I can't help, I'm going to pass them on. So that's kind of the mentality that you should go into if you do find yourself in that situation. So moving on to integrity. Like I said, I really should have worked this out, so I'm not like picking this up, putting it back down. Okay, integrity. Social workers are continually aware of the profession's mission, values, ethical principles, and ethical standards and practice in a manner consistent with them. Social workers should take measures to care for themselves professionally and personally. Social workers act honestly and responsibly and promote ethical practices on the part of the organizations with which they are affiliated. Pretty solid. If you haven't noticed, a lot of these things are going like kind of hand in hand, right? Like there's some Bible verses that might fit one, but then they can also fit another. And so that's what I thought was super, super cool when I went through to read all this. And I was like, whoa, it's all interconnected. And it's another word you hear in social work a lot too, is interconnected. There's so many things that kind of play off of each other, affect each other. In the mental health world, but it's really cool to see it in the Bible too, but also social work and the Bible. So for integrity, the first one I have here is Proverbs 10:9. Whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but whoever takes crooked paths will be found out. So pretty honest here. I think this is Solomon contrasting the safety of honesty versus like having to live with lies or deception, because we all know it all comes out. I mean, there's celebrities on the news who we thought were great and they are currently dealing with some consequences for their actions. So again, no matter what, if you're doing the right thing, you're good. If you're doing the wrong thing, it's going to eventually come to the surface. So always take the right path, right? Proverbs 11:3. That's from Proverbs. The integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity. Sounds more like a warning there too, like stay on the right path. So next one I have here is Ephesians 4:25. It says, therefore, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbor, for we are all members of one body. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this is Paul calling for like honest communication within the church. And so I will say that not only is it important as a social worker to use honest communication with your clients, it is also very crucial that you use honest communication with your coworkers if you're on a multidisciplinary team. So that means like if you're working in a hospital type environment, that's the only one I can think of as an example right now. There's others. You're collaborating with nurses, doctors, psychiatrists, stuff like that. You need to be open and honest. And a lot of times us social workers are the ones that are spending a little bit more time with patients. And so sometimes patients will reveal some information and you've got to immediately get that information back to a doctor or a nurse, because sometimes it can dictate how their care is going to go. And so that's where that communication comes in. Some things are very time sensitive and you need to relay that information quickly. So the next one I have is, Psalm 25:21. This is, may integrity and uprightness protect me because my hope, Lord, is in you. I feel like that just kind of ties all of that together, right? Your integrity will protect you if you make sure that you're always doing the right thing, doing the best of your ability. One of the things I tell myself before I make any choices or moves, or especially in ethical dilemmas, the first thing I'll ask myself is, if I make this choice, can I stand before God? Not that I'm necessarily going to have to, but just in my mind, I'm like, would I be okay standing before God explaining to him why I made this choice? Like, will that be coming from a place of genuine love and care in my heart? Or am I making this choice out of spite, maybe because I'm trying to get somebody back, things like that. And so that's a question that I carry with myself as a Christian social worker all the time, is why am I going to make this decision? And if I told God that's why I'm making this decision, do I feel like he would at the very least understand? And if I feel like God would be like, nope, you had a little hate in your heart when you made that choice, then that's when I'm like, okay, I got to take a step back and gather myself and really think this through. So the last one I have here is competence. Back to the Code of Ethics. All right, so competence. Social workers continually strive to increase their professional knowledge and skills and apply them in practice. Social workers should aspire to contribute to the knowledge base of the profession. So moving on to our last few Bible verses for competence. First one I have here is Colossians 3:23. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord and not for human masters. I was literally just talking about how in an ethical dilemma, when I make a decision, do I say like, yes, I could stand before God and explain to him why I made this decision and feel as though he would be understanding? That's working for the Lord, right? Like, yes, I work for, my boss and the organization and all of those things, and it's important to adhere to their standards. But at the end of the day, I serve God above all else. And if at any point in time I'm asked to do something or behave in a way that goes against my Christian values, I cannot and will not do it. I can give a million examples, but I don't want to keep talking too long. So that's just what I had to say. I know a lot of times I've heard of us Christian social workers get put in positions where we're being asked to do something that goes against our morals and our values. And I'm here to tell you there is going to be a lot of pressure. In the nicest, most polite way possible, say no, maybe suggest somebody else do it, pray about it first. That's what I always fall back on, pray about it. But remember, you do serve God first. All right, the next one I have here is Proverbs 22:29. Do you see someone skilled in their work? Well, they will serve before kings. They will not serve before obscure men. And this is kind of a proverb that's just affirming that diligence and skill lead to honor and influence. So again, staying up to date, being aware, so that way you're not, I know this sounds mean, but ignorant. If you're not staying up to date on what's going on, and I mean, we as social workers have so many hours of continuing struggling today with words. We have so many continuing education units that we are supposed to acquire in order to renew our license. So I would argue to say social workers don't really have an option to not be up to date. I guess you could, and then you wouldn't be able to renew your license, but you've got to be doing that, right? Because that's how we get that important information. But not only that, it's okay for you to provide information that you've learned to other people who might need it. And I think that's one of the best ways that as social workers can reach out and reach people. For example, I am fascinated with more of the psychology side of things, how the brain works, how trauma affects the brain. I know my husband loves a lot of the I can't think of the word right now, but like neuropsychology stuff and like specific like brain patterns and things like that. And when I learn something about it that might be helpful to another person and explaining what they might be going through, like, I'm going to share it. I know a lot of social workers can charge for their services, but I'm not saying I'm doing full on therapy sessions with strangers, because that's an ethical concern in itself, but just providing knowledge to people, collaborating, sharing information, like, that's kind of part of our responsibility, right? And I do just want to say that because it's part of our responsibility, it is also our duty to make sure that we are sharing accurate information and for the sake of being helpful, not to harm somebody, right? You don't want to pull out facts just to call somebody out, because then that's not done out of love. All right, so the last two I have here, 2 Timothy 2:15. Do your best to present yourself to God as one approved, a worker who does not need to be ashamed and who correctly handles the word of truth. Kind of just reiterates what I was just talking about with the previous verse, I would say. And the last one here is Ecclesiastes. I don't know why that did not look like Ecclesiastes. It is. It's Ecclesiastes 10:10. If the axe is dull and its edge unsharpened, more strength is needed, but skill will bring success. And so this is kind of Solomon, I believe, using a metaphor that wisdom and preparation are more effective than brute force. And I can say, as I would say, decently new Christian with only about 3 years under my belt, I have experienced so much brute force efforts from more seasoned Christians and churches, and it's honestly pushed me away a lot. Never away from God, never away from Jesus. I will always answer to Jesus 1000%. But it has made me weary into going into certain churches, into working with certain groups of Christians. I'm not saying I won't. I'm not saying, I'm shunning them or anything, but it's one of those things, like, if I have the option to not, then I probably won't. Now, I do believe that the Holy Spirit can pull me in certain directions, and even when I'm not wanting to do something, Jesus will pull me there, and I'm like, okay, fine. But what I'm hoping to accomplish with this channel is not only the ability for other people to share their testimonies and reach others, but I'm going to be making a lot of videos going forward that are going to be meant to bring the Bible and social work into one and educate those who are maybe more seasoned Christians within the church. There's a lot of things that I think are done with good intention, and I know people mean well, but a lot of the things that some churches do can be very hurtful and can push people away, turn believers away. And I want us to try to avoid that. So this would be the first video, I guess you can say, that I'm trying to provide some kind of education for those. I know the next video, I have a testimony. I'm really excited to get that one done. But I also have a few other videos coming up where I am trying to provide, like I said, some of that educational bit, specifically geared more towards church members and church folk. But I also have a lot that are going to be talking to the newer Christians, but also Christians who might be getting into social work and Christians who are social workers currently. So that's kind of where we're laying right now. Again, and like I said, things can kind of pivot and change as this channel continues to develop. So hope you guys are having a good time, and I hope you stick around. I look forward to seeing you guys on my next video. And as soon as I turn the camera off, I'm going to say a quick prayer for everyone who's tuned in. Again, thank you so much for sticking this out with me and bearing with me while my sloppy self gets some kind of idea together for this channel. So hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you so much. God bless.